Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, where we provide world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. And of course, on days like this, we're going to talk about iguanas yet again. I'm Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, and our show today is Coexistence and Sustainability with Pet Psychic Aminah. And we're going to talk about what happens when you feed wildlife. When I say you, I'm talking about you. That's right, you out there feeding the wildlife, the birds, the insects, the iguanas. I don't know. Let's find out from our expert if this is a good idea. Joining us from sunny California, it's Pet Psychic Aminah. Not and sunny today, huh?
Thank you. And everybody says, how's the weather? Really? You're going to ask me about the weather? Let's see if I go that way, because I'm more central right now. I'm more central. I grew up in Southern in the high desert. I am a heat girl. I can do the heat. I visited Death Valley a couple times. I am not a Death Valley girl. I'm not a Death Valley girl. And we've got hills and wonderful things, and we got lots of animals here to coexist with. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Is I know for you, Dr. Jacalyn, specifically, you are living with these iguanas. So you are going to be more of the expert. I have pretty much handled most of my iguana experience from a very young age, because of course I love all things animal, and I would have had somebody else's animal, or I was at a training, or I was at an educational class. I was lucky enough to be around a gentleman who did wildlife as a co-career, I want to say, because he was a businessman. So what's it like? Tell us, what's it like to have iguanas on your roof every day? Do they make noise because they're heavy enough to go with those claws?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that. I'm just going to solo myself so people can see this. This
there
is an
you
example,
go.
Yeah, of one of the little neighbors living here.
Little.
And
okay.
Yeah, this thing is pretty big. I would say it's probably 3 feet long. And so the interesting thing is, and I had to look this up, Aminah, but there are green iguanas. I believe they're indigenous to this area, or it's the exact opposite. And then the ones that look like that are not indigenous. They were actually brought here by someone. So we have, on any given day, this morning I saw 3 green iguanas, and they have very long tails, but they look like they're relatively new to this world. And then on the roof, we could have at any time 6, 7, 8 giant iguanas they picked our roof. So I think I told you we made a phone call, and it turns out that there are people who specialize in removing iguanas, and they, I guess, use a BB gun or something. I don't know what they do.
They kill them?
They don't kill them. They stun them, and then they move them somewhere else.
Okay. So, and what I don't know, so I really want to be fair to everybody, that is, just because they're using a BB gun, that pellet is teeny tiny. It still does a lot of damage, but you can get it back out. Their skin is pretty tough. It's possible that it doesn't penetrate past their outer skin. Some of them, they're like armadillos. This is armor. Armadillos have a name that starts with armor. Because of that hard. It's a great example to say you're going to find a lot of iguanas who have that really structured, hard surface to protect themselves.
Look at the bolt. Do you see the bolt in it?
Exactly. And they are doggone fast, aren't they? I have seen them run.
They can run up to 11 miles an hour. And what's interesting, when I was out for my walk today, I only saw green ones.
Yep.
And I walk this loop, it's about 2 miles, but they're in the grass. And as you approach, it's like, boom, they all start running, but they'll run like 3 or 4 and then they stop. Then 3 or, I can't figure it out.
They don't have the lung capacity, I understand, to do more than sprints. And if you know athletes and stuff like that, I was a sprinter. I did hurdles, and so I understand you need that energy for X amount of space. So because I would suspect, and I haven't looked up their lung capacity and all of that type of stuff, and luckily they don't smoke, so that's not an issue.
Imagine if they start smoking
on those roofs for the fireplaces, but it's Florida, and you don't probably have very many indoor fireplaces. They need that burst, and then that burst, but they also know that they can't get away from predators, and everybody needs to realize we are looked at as carnivores, going to eat them, going to shoot them, going to kill them in some fashion. So they are looking at how fast do I have to go and how far can I get on that one breath, on that one jog. And they're out of there. And you've seen them. They're so agile. That tail is everything about equilibrium, everything about, imagine an udder, not an udder, what is
rudder?
The boat? No, the thing in the boat that goes down, the rudder.
The rudder.
I was close. Udder is for milk. Rudder is for boat. And it's to guide the direction. That's what that tail does. It takes the balance of the body and whips it out of there. Yes, can they use it for defense and smack you with it? Sure. But the point is, this is getting like a boat. It is telling them how fast and how far they can run. But their lung capacity is not deep enough to go for very far, very often.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks. That's a good point. I wasn't aware of that. So our show today is what happens when we feed wildlife. So no one I know is feeding them, but what I do know is that giant one I showed you, that's not indigenous here. So somehow somebody brought it here. I don't know. It swam 100 miles. I don't know what it did. But somehow I got here, and it's finding something to eat. And from what I read, they like to eat, I guess, plants. They like to eat flowers. There's certain things that they don't like milkweed, which I'm thinking of putting in so we get more monarch butterflies and get rid of them.
Exactly what I've done. The same thing.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, I know of many people who have bird feeders out, right? We've got a ton of ducks and those, I forget what they're called. They look like storks.
Right.
And so people are feeding them. There's a community with a big lake and people are out feeding all these various, there must be 100 iguanas, those turkey ducks. People are putting out food for them and there's more and more of them. And they're wondering why the people don't want to live in that specific community.
Have you ever had your car, boat, house pooped on? 100 times in an hour? It's terrible. What we are missing is love nature, love your animals, but don't love your animals. They have this in a movie. I honestly loved it enough. I still the idea because it's the same. If you see a problem with rats or iguanas or dogs or cats, find out why they're coming. Either you've got, God forbid, a female animal, dog, cat, whatever, and she's about ready to give birth and she's looking for a safe place to do that. Hopefully you can accommodate her, get her fixed. She can still nurse her babies, and we stop the baby thing right there. If everybody keeps feeding the birds, then you wonder why there's poop on your car, and you wonder why there's the parks look terrible, because I don't know if you've tried, carnivore feces stays together because of the mix of what we're eating. Yes, I include us. People, sadly, homeless or otherwise, do it also outside in public. So there's no biodegradable quickness there with all of that, with all that fiber. If you're eating plants, strictly plants, fish, or whatever that wild animal is, these birds, they're going to have more of that liquid, more of the white, which is just slippery and messy. but it will, with rain, wash through. Now you multiply that by 3,000, because you got birds coming and going, and dogs and cats, whatever, geese, and you have overtaken what nature can handle. So then if you want to keep the birds, you need to make accommodations that people step in to help, because nature cannot handle more than it's supposed to have. But we people, we don't take that into consideration. We really don't. And I really want to really hit this home. We cannot, in the wild, support every animal that you decide to adopt, a snake or a cricket and a spider and a cat and a dog, and you one day say, I can't handle this, I'm sick, I'm this, whatever the reasons are. That's not a judgment ever on anybody. And then you just let them loose, and the dogs get shot and the cats get shot or put into shelters, and or all these animals, there's somebody puts poison out to kill them all because you couldn't handle them. We've got to have a better way. I know the shelters are trying, but we also can't just rely on them, because they get full also. They cannot possibly take every unwanted animal. We have got to spay and neuter. That includes reptiles. That includes any exotic pet. And a lot of times, if you get them from a good breeder, that will happen, because the breeder wants that DNA possibly to run what his market, if this is their business. So they're going to possibly sterilize the animals you adopt, so there cannot be any more babies. And it is a big industry. It's a huge industry.
And you mentioned about reptiles. So for those who don't know, reptiles actually lay eggs, correct?
Yes, most all of them. I can't think of any that do live births. Birds and reptiles do eggs. You're going to get the turtles are going to do the same thing. You're going to get the peregrine falcons, all the types of things, especially in Florida. Here in California, we're going to have more of a mix. As I've mentioned a million times, I grew up in the desert, and I got asked once, somebody who I don't think I knew very well, and they're like, "Oh, you're going to Death Valley?" I said, "Yeah, we're gonna go camping, with my family," and she's like, "Why? It's really hot." And I said, "I grew up in the high desert. I can take a little heat. You just walk slower and drink a lot of water." But it's, the topography is beautiful. You just have to have the resources, and the same with animals. If we're going to have these animals, we've got to have enough resources, and we don't, because we're already overpopulated by people and by animals. What happens when we're overpopulated by people? Dr. Jacalyn, got a million choices you can make. What would you say is a great one that comes to your mind? Anything. We're overpopulated by people. What gets lost in resources?
There's not enough air, there's not enough water, there's not enough mental attention, there's not enough funding. We could go
There's
on.
not enough food. There's
not
enough food because we're taking it for housing. And so therefore, like where I'm at now, I'm considered in a valley. We do have hills on either side, but I'm considered in a valley, which was called, it's an old name, but I used to teach history, so this is why I know this so well. It was called Valley of Heart's Delight. And what it represented was the fact that this valley was feeding a huge chunk of the state of California. And the state was the size it is today. We didn't add Alaska or anybody else. We're pretty much been the same side. But because we had flat valleys with hills and then mountains later on outside of our weather is just ideal, because it's very warm and direct. Now, because of population, we've lost 90% of all those agricultural fields, and houses were put up. But look at the difference in that time, anything from the 1970s down, and you can feed the people, because you would only be having 30,000 people in the city. any of the big cities. San Francisco probably maybe was 30,000. San Francisco is not a big place. It's got oceans around it, but it's in my state. So it's a good example. You have to think about how many people we have. And it's not like you can tell everybody, we'll stop having kids. We can't afford it, because hopefully people are deciding what they can afford in their life. What I'd love to see is people planting native flowers, native plants, and vegetables in their own yard. I've talked about this a number of times. I live in a condo. I have a patio. That's it. And I probably have 15 pots there. But I got all different sizes and all different things. And because my goal is not to grow fruit or vegetables or asparagus, I'm feeding. Do you know, Dr. Jacalyn, what I'm feeding?
You're feeding the monarch butterflies.
And
And
more important than monarchs.
the
Who is
honeybees.
the most important insect on the planet?
Honeybees.
Yay! I've corrupted her completely. She's an alpha. Without a honeybee, we have no food. That's just a fact. So I love flowers. How much of a hardship do you think it is to pick a bunch of flowers that my honeybees will love? So it's a win-win. If you can do one plant, that's great. If you could do 10, that's great. And anything in between or around. I have a very small patio, and yet I have probably 15, maybe more, pots. And I did a stair step one. I've done flat ones. I've done big ones. It just depends on what I had and or what I fell in love with when I went to the hardware store last time. It is that easy. And you can grow plants in your home. As I sit here and talk to everybody, in front of me right over there is a ficus tree. These are great indoor plants. And I have carried this specific plant over every move I've made since I was 19. I'm not 19. I'm not even close to 19. And that's what I'm telling you. These things can stick with you. They can move with you. I've had this thing tied up in the back of my truck, covered all so it didn't lose its leaves. And we can all do better. Pick anything, pick any kind of plant. Even cactus have tremendous value, especially if you're in the desert region and you're planting cactus outside so the animals have water. That's where they get it. It's from the succulents and the water. Just some tips.
Sorry. Something else I think is really interesting when you talk about us doing better, and I don't have this information, but for example, in South Florida, this is a destination where more and more people are coming. And so they're building more and more homes and more high rises and more communities. And I'm
More
wondering,
freeways, more.
yeah, more infrastructure. And what I'm wondering is when this is being planned in the planning stages, are they taking into consideration the wildlife that lives in that area that will be displaced? Because I think that's also, we were talking about lizards, but we could talk about any of these birds, alligators, whatever, that are living someplace, and then all of a sudden they're building a community, and where are they supposed to go?
And that is why we have, Fish and Wildlife can tell you about this a lot, is the conflict between humanity and nature. And I don't care if you're a plant or an animal or a bug. Somebody's going to object that you're there. Somebody's going to say, well, no, we are going to bring in $80,000 worth of revenue into this community. But who dies? Because something, when you dig up all of that area and put sod, or you put bark, or you put a freeway, or whatever, once you dig up the native turf and the plants, you don't get to go back. You can plant, and there are complete organizations that will help you choose to put in native plants. Sometimes we have to take down plants because they're dying or they're dangerous and somebody's going to get injured or hurt. I'm not talking about any of these types of things. I'm talking about a healthy grove of water, a place, and animals who live off those resources. And then all of a sudden you want to put a golf course there. You know how many times that's happened? Hundreds and hundreds. They want to put in a pool. They want to put in a hotel. They want to put it. When people think of possibly like Las Vegas, well, it's a big old desert. What's the matter? They still had animals. When all of those things, all the casinos and all the hotels were built, somebody got displaced. Are we going to make everybody happy? No. What I'm asking you to do is think about the consequences to the planet, because we're living global warming, and it's going to get bad, and it's going to get worse, because we still don't think about others. And I mean your fellow man to your fellow animal, nature, plant, before ourselves. My take on it, I'd like to be wrong. I'd like to be horribly wrong, but that's not the case. I don't know if you found that, Dr. Jacalyn, but I really struggle with the fact that we are so incredibly self-centered about our own needs. And oh my gosh, that's so much oil. We could do that. Well, you know how many dinosaurs died to donate that oil? And we wiped them off the planet. We literally wiped. I don't even know anymore. It's not kept up because it honestly breaks my heart to see how many animals are now on the endangered species list. I worked with tigers for years, and it was terrible that we had them, but they were no longer in circuses. They were no longer in a place where they were abused and were forced to do tricks. And one of the tigers we had, actually a Bengal tiger, was a pet in somebody's backyard. And that's when Fish and Wildlife got involved and said, yeah, no, you can't have this in your backyard. And where do you go? You go to a sanctuary. So it would be great if sanctuaries didn't have to exist, but they do. So I'm glad for that. I'm glad that we can have a place to take our pets. Right now is one of the best times for spay and neutering our pets, because it's gotten so much cheaper. You've got a lot of rescues that will do it for free or very inexpensive. Check with your shelters. Any pet shelter, in the cities or a private one, they are always offering free spay and neuter. That means one's a boy, one's a girl. That's the only difference in that, if anybody hasn't heard of that yet. But it's really important that we don't have any more pets than we can give homes. And things happen in people's lives. I understand that. It's happened to me. I remember the day that I had to take a cat back to the shelter because I simply couldn't handle it during the beginning of my college years. And that was my big learning lesson of saying, okay, this better never ever happen. I need to grow up and realize what I can afford and what I can't. Don't beat yourself up. Just do what's right by the animals. If you don't want, or your neighbor has a gun and it will shoot anybody on sight as far as wild animals, then don't feed them, because you're just setting these animals to walk through his yard or her yard, and then their life is over. And we really need all these animals. We really, really do. Even the spiders, they're fabulous. And they eat mosquitoes. It's really great.
The question I have for you, because you brought up a really good point that people don't really think about, is their neighbors. So if you see wildlife, here in South Florida, I've seen people post things that an alligator came walking across their property. Right. What's the best thing to do if you encounter wildlife that could be dangerous? They are probably looking for food. So right. The first thing is not to feed them.
And don't be the food.
Right, don't be the food. So keep yourself safe. And then who do you call?
Fish and Wildlife is typical in the United States, and every state has Fish and Wildlife. And this is a great organization that manages a lot of this. Now, in your area, I would say you probably have a plethora of rescue sites. But if you start with something with like Fish and Wildlife, that is a great resource to send you out to the right person. Let's say you have a lost horse, or you have a lost iguana, and it's yours and it's run off and you're running around. With domesticated pets, and I'm talking primarily dogs and cats, they are doing people who have, they're not squirrels. Anyways, there's another really, it's really a vogue thing right now. Everybody's getting on it. I want to say it's a squirrel, but it's not. And I'll think of the course later. Anyways, when you get a pet, microchip them. Every veterinarian in the world and anybody in the US who is doing the work they're supposed to be doing offers microchipping. And it's great because all the vets have it's a gun. They call it a gun. And it's a little magnet thing. And it reads your name and address. So it's not like the collar that we always had, with the tag that said, "Hi, I'm Bob. My mother is blah, blah," or "Call this number if I'm found." Well, a lot of times those things, the collars get torn off and you got nothing to get the dog or cat back. So many pets are dropped off at shelters, and they can tell by the way the animal can sit and stay and eat and wag his tail, whatever. They know, well, this has been with people, but where are their people? Always, always, always get any pet you have. I don't care if you have a squirrel and it's in your house, get it microchipped. Because God forbid there's a fire in your house, you weren't home, they put the cage, the firemen put it outside so they saved your animal and it got loose. It happens. When we think that it can't, it does. So plan for the worst and prepare for the best. Meaning have water, food, a basket, whatever. When in a house, our house actually caught fire, but we already had a fire exit plan. And we all met my parents over across the street. And I know my sister and I were the youngest, and we were actually put in one of the vehicles because it was so cold and wet. These are what you have to plan for. If you live in a state with earthquakes, I do, I know how to behave. Our kids are taught that in school, and they have drills. Why wouldn't you do it for your pets? Have a plan that if something, God forbid, happens to you, that your pets have a place to go. Not a lot of people don't take that in consideration. We think about it for our kids, our spouse, our furniture. We were just talking about that with Dr. Jacalyn, all these things. But what about your pet? What about your pet? You need to have a good, at least one person, if not two, because God forbid their life is a turmoil or they pass before you do. Have people chosen and say, "Hey, could you take Fido? Could you take my kitty if something happens to me?" It's really, really going to give you peace of mind. And then you know your animals will be cared for, because that's the best we can do. And that's what I want you to do, is just to think ahead.
Excellent points. And I think also that sometimes relationships break up.
Absolutely.
And you have to decide in advance who's getting Fido, who's getting my little Eiffel. Look, I showed you my little dogs. I haven't shown them for a while, but my little, sorry. And I blew you up instead of me.
That's okay. So sweet.
Aren't they so
sweet.
cute?
I always love that picture. I'm so glad. And look, you get to enjoy that. And now the photographers all are up on all this. They want that business. Yeah, they'll do your pets, your snakes, your person, grandma sitting next to you, whatever. So, and you know what really helps? Let's say, using your picture as a great example, that your dogs were dog napped, because they're adorable. They're absolutely adorable and purebred. The whole look is great. I can't imagine what the grooming bill was, but that's up to the people that steal it. And then can you imagine you would have no pictures or no vet bills, to go to the police and say, hey, I own this dog. And this guy says, no, I own this dog, because he would have maybe changed the chip by then or whatever. And you're like, no, look, I got this picture from Christmas. I got this picture from it. But you don't know how many of those small details where taking a picture of your animals is joy.
True.
But it could also save you on identifying that actually is your animal, because you have history and you have time, and our pictures are dated.
I'm going to spotlight you for a moment and go get something that has pictures of the dogs. I think you'll really enjoy it. Let me put you on the spotlight. Go ahead.
So tell me what you want to talk about, and tell me what you want to know. Is adopting a pet is a really big decision. And talking about how do you choose? I have had clients that do everything from researching the breed, understanding what their proclivities are, all of that, size, food, cost. You are a college student, do not get a St. Bernard. Do not. You couldn't afford it and school unless somebody else is paying all that. But what you're going to show us is perfect. This is a perfect lap dog, a perfect one person, goes for walks, just not too far. Let's see. Oh, look at that.
My mother had this made for me. I can't even tell you how long ago. You can see my hair. It was a hair disaster. But yeah, I had this bag, and these dogs will always be, close by on this bag for sure.
Absolutely. And it brings you so much joy. I can hear it in your voice, and hear it in your gesture that you wanted to go get, and that it's close. That, is like, where are you going to run to? Off camera. Oh yeah, that doesn't need a bag.
And my mom gave it to me, so that's even more special. And she spent a lot of time with the dogs as well. She loved them.
Well, and that's it. Animals make people's life matter. I don't know who's listening that this is for you specifically. I haven't had this happen on our channel in a while, but Kim, if you're listening, your pets do love you. We make mistakes. We discipline because we're frustrated more than we need to. But when you forgive yourself and they forgive you, which animals do, we can all be better. We can all do better. We can all love better. We can work with a coach. We can work with watching things like this, channels that so many of us trainers are trying to share so much free information so that you can all do better. Big hugs out to you, Karen.
Oh,
thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to make sure that people are taking away from this specific episode.
Let's go get water. Yay!
It's important to enjoy nature, and it's even more important to let nature be instead of trying to interfere with it. What do you think?
Yeah, because this is where we got into trouble. We got into trouble because humanity thinks they know better. We don't. We can research it. We can study it. We can do pretty well. But if we let nature take its course, as they say, let me use a perfect example. I have a really big pet peeve with the dams. And it's because when I was doing my college education, I chose to write a paper. It was one of the topics I got to choose. And I wanted to do something I hadn't read or hadn't worked up on. So at that point, I'd already worked in a wildlife sanctuary, and I was yet to go to the second one. And so I had a great deal of experience with animals, exotics specifically. So I wanted to go a different direction. So I found out about dams. We have dams all over the United States, and I'm sure all over the world, but I live in the US. And what people don't realize is when they put the dam here, because they're going to put the houses there and they don't want it flooded, and because usually it's about building a town, houses, buildings for community, for commerce, whatever the reason is, they're trying to reroute, honestly, a God-given location that this water goes. If we understood the gravity of what we're doing, and we do today, let me be really clear. Let me jump to the end of that sentence is, when this was being done in the early 1900s specifically, and all the way through probably this, I want to say the 60s and 70s, 1960s and 70s. But by the time we got to the 60s and 70s, people were starting to have to put them back. Do you know how expensive it is to put a dam back? Just to take it away and let the water run or redirect it. I wrote one of my college papers on this topic, and it's been years since I've talked about it. So I'm going to give you the feel points. The feel points are, there are animals that rely on the water that goes the way God set it up. When the rains come, it goes this way. That's how a river is created. It is the low part where the water naturally is going to gravitate to because of the topography. So you have deer or any kind of wildlife who are using that for water for their babies. It's a safe place 20 feet back to cross. It creates trees. It creates life on every single plane, from insect to carnivore. When people get involved and say, no, we don't want to do that anymore. We're going to move that water over there 2 feet, 3 feet, 7 miles. It doesn't matter. When you close the dam that was made by nature, what we know today as a fact, when I wrote my paper, it was a controversy and they were just starting to talk about replacing dams with no dam at all and letting the water run freely. But they had to deal with the construction that was already in place. So they were trying to fix what they found out, 10 years later, 15 years later. It wasn't even that long. That was a horrible decision. Every animal that was beyond the dam failed, or we are so close to extinction. And we've got enough reasons right now for that. But dams are a huge problem in the native world because you're making a decision based on human needs that are not compatible with nature. Now, has that changed? Yes, we are in that process. Is it there yet? No, because I still hear about it, and this came up in the news, 4 or 5 weeks ago, that they were talking about removing a dam again. So it's still happening. And there's so many times now that they cannot remove it because there's so much built after the dam, housing, a town, whatever. You'd have to relocate all those people. And we're talking about hundreds of people. So what can we do? That is what science, native people, the PhDs in natural restoration, and the construction people are finally all working together. Is it perfect? No, we've got tons of time and tons of work to do. But just know, dams are a huge problem to the native animal and educate. And it's great. You can go and see the fish or go and, paddle, but that's not the way that water was supposed to go. And that's how we got to what we're doing now, and that's the climate change. We have changed things so drastically that the trees that were surviving and thriving, I really want you to hear that, thriving in those areas because of the river, creek, whatever, then went without. And we lost so much of that native growth, which means you lost the animals. Do you know, Dr. Jacalyn, they actually took beavers out of these waterways who put up their own dam and relocated them.
I saw it.
Died.
Yeah.
And now, you know what they're doing with the beavers?
Bringing them back.
Studying.
Oh, study. Okay.
Bringing them back. You are absolutely right. And studying what they are doing. Why did they pick that creek? Why did they pick that dam? Oh, they just live next door. It's bigger than that. And finally, we have engineers with college degrees, or not, whichever, or real life experience, which is great, but they're going to nature to find out how to actually do it right. That I celebrate every day when I'm doing this study in my animal science degree, and I'm looking at this, like, how many people did I kill? Because I had plenty of dams. You live in the desert. People were moving water all the time because it was a flood, and then there was nothing. And then there was a flood, and then there was nothing. So they were trying to get everybody as we got more populated. The problem is they didn't look at the structure of why that dam was built by the animals that did it.
Right.
They never asked. And all you have to do is watch a beaver for a few days and go, oh, I get it.
Now I get it.
Yeah. And we need to tune into animals. And that's what we need to do with our pets. The same thing. If you see a wagging tail, great. If you see the fur go up, maybe don't move.
Yeah.
If it growls, definitely don't move. And then just say, hey, you know what? I see you. I obviously am here on a bad day. I'm just going to back up. But keep your eyes forward. Don't give them your back, because you're just asking to be jumped.
Exactly. And start to practice backward running, by the way.
Well, then you just fall, and then you look like a wonderful piece of fun. So I'm going to go with just walk back slowly and go, you know, I'm here. Yeah. So many people don't realize that animals in general, pets specifically, have the right to be respected.
Absolutely. Pet Psychic Aminah, you brought so many great points. Again, I'm learning more and more. I can't believe I'm still learning. But we have to close out for this week. We have to shut it down. How can people reach out to you, and who would you like to contact you?
When you are struggling with your pet for whatever reason, end of life decisions to behavior decisions, all of these things, do you adopt, do you not adopt? Come, let's talk. And everything. You want all my contact information and stuff about me and how to find my Facebook page and all the funny things I post, bridgingworlds.us, BRIDG,
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I hope you have a beautiful weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll be back on Monday with a woman's prerogative and a whole host of shows. So enjoy, and please go over to our channel and subscribe, USA Global TV and Radio, and reach out to Pet Psychic Aminah. What are you doing? Come on. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye everybody. See you next Friday.
Bye.